So we were just talking about how you got into the practice of going to lunch, and then over time it evolved from various places to then Coogies, where you go now.
Right.
And Bob went on and said some really wonderful things, and my annoying iPhone did not tape them and cut off.
Oh.
So we're going to resume. So, so my next question was, do you have any particular salient legal memories you'd like to share about my dad?
Well, I have a lot of memories of our conversations about the law, both before he went on the bench and afterwards. And secondly, in terms of our interactions with each other, specifically in our legal careers, um, the the two things that are most striking, I think, is that when he decided to run for judge, he was commissioner in Beverly Hills, and very much liked by the judges there. He decided to run for judge against a phantom judge who never seemed to show up in court. And I was able to make some phone calls and get some of my old political friends to support his run. And I like to think that that really helped him win that election. And I think that's the best thing I ever did for the legal system of the state of California.
Which political friends?
Henry Waxman and Howard Berman,
Okay.
who were in the legislature, I believe, at that time, and then went on to Congress. And Henry, of course, just retired after 40 years in Congress, and I think one of the most illustrious legislative careers in the history of our country.
And these are friends of yours from law school, or?
From undergraduate days, in Young Democrats at UCLA.
Oh. And so, was there anything that, did my dad repay the favor in any way?
He did. There came a time, I was a professor of political science at UCLA, and there came a time when I finally decided I was interested in trying out the practice. And I first, my natural bent was to go for appellate work, because it's very much in a kind of academic mode. I first went to the clerk of the Court of Appeal in Los Angeles, Clay Robbins, kind of a cowboy. He was not very receptive. He said, actually, would you, if you were convicted of a felony, would you want a professor to represent you? I felt like saying yes. But he obviously, it was clear that his answer was no. In any case, and he might have been a bit anti-Semitic, there were stories about that. In any case,
or just ignorant.
I told your father the story, and he said that he played tennis with Otto Kaus, who was the presiding justice of one of the divisions of the Court of Appeal, and a great, great judge. He talked to him either before or after a tennis match, and I got a letter from Kaus putting me on his panel. I was appointed to a case. I won the case in his court, and then the Attorney General took a petition for review to the Supreme Court, granted, and I won the case in the Supreme Court. So I thought, oh, this is great.
Did you ever talk to my dad about the case?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Did he think you were going to lose?
I try to remember now. No, I think he thought I had a pretty good chance. It was People versus Cardenas. It was one of the first cases about the prejudicial use of gang evidence being a basis for reversal of a conviction.
Wow. So, is there anything else that you'd like to share about my dad? Any kind of anecdotes or just thoughts about his legal practice in general?
Sure. Well, and as I remember well, many of our conversations, not all of them, but many of our conversations over lunch while he was a judge. And what impressed me was his independence of mind and his determination to do the right thing, act in accordance with the law as he understood it. And he always worked things through for himself and satisfied himself that this is what the law really intended. And his willingness to do that even when there were pressures not to do it. And specifically, I remember we had many discussions about the tendency of many judges, and I think the supervising judges, to push the idea of settling cases, getting plea bargains, rather than going to trial. And he really resisted that trend. He didn't like the idea of pushing people into agreements that might not have been appropriate for them. And just wouldn't do that, was not interested in producing in the sense of getting rid of cases. He was interested in production of justice, which would mean, when appropriate, having the case go to trial. I remember that particularly.
And so it sounds like you probably would have been in trial a lot then. So you probably weren't having lunch as much back then.
But no, we were still having lunches. I don't know if he'd had that many trials. That I don't remember. But he certainly had that attitude, I know, and sometimes got into conflict with other judges about that. The other thing that we had a lot of discussions about, that I remember very well, and that were very interesting, stimulating, was the jury system. Didn't like juries much. He really felt that they had too big a role. They got in the way of doing justice, the law. I took the other view and argued that they were a kind of democratic element in the system. We particularly disagreed about the practice of jury nullification. That is to say, the jury deciding not to follow the law for whatever reason, and to acquit for no good legal reason, and the fact that nothing could be done about that. He was not happy with that. I really thought that this was a good thing, and particularly we had a lot of discussions about the O.J. case and what I believe was jury nullification there, because I simply didn't believe that there was any reasonable doubt about guilt there. I think he was very troubled by the fact always that I was willing to accept a practice which meant that people violated the law, because those jurors were violating the law. But the structure said they could get away with it, and that nothing could be done about it.
Well, they were more likely to see reasonable doubt in cases if they had emotions telling them to look for it. I mean, they were still following the law, right?
Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. One of my friends at the time who was on the defense team got very angry at me during a conversation we were having on Warren Olney's show about this on the day the verdict came out, and said, no, there was reasonable doubt. I just didn't think so. I really didn't think. I thought they decided that what was uncovered was racism in the LAPD, and that was the basis for the verdict, and that they simply decided to ignore the facts. But I wasn't there. I don't know.
Since we're talking about OJ, I have one more question.
Yes,
Did my dad ever talk to you about, what happened, his involvement in the OJ case?
Oh yes, absolutely. We talked a good deal about that. We got together. Actually, that was one of the few times we got together for dinner, actually, because he was very troubled by the accusations that were made, and wanted to talk to me about it. I felt that he certainly had done nothing, absolutely nothing wrong. At worst, he followed the recommendations of the city attorney or the DA, whoever it was who was prosecuting. and in fact was not satisfied with what they did. Really imposed somewhat heavier punishment than they were asking for. So you couldn't ask for more than that. And I think he was caught up unfairly in what happened later, as if anybody somehow could have predicted that this man was going to murder a couple of people.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
Well, only that I still very much enjoy having lunch with your father. It is an important part of my life. It's really become, part of the fabric of my life to have lunch with him fairly frequently. And I'm looking forward to his return from Vienna so that we can pick up again.
Cookies.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this interview, Bob, and we'll see you at Cookies.
Okay.